The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome to the next episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, episode 166, and welcome. This is Dave, your host and author, and for today we are heading back to the nation's oldest city, St. Augustine, Florida. It's been a little while since we've been back there. It's actually probably been before COVID. And to kick things off there, we did something a little bit different. There's a lot of tours, obviously, in the city. Most people will recognize and jump on one of the tram tours, and there are a few that are around there. And lots of walking tours, a lot of ghost tours. But when you take a look at the tours that are in the city, they focus on St. Augustine's past. And I understand that because clearly that is their main source of tourism, are people that are coming to see the nation's oldest city, as we mentioned earlier. There's not a whole lot of tours that talk a lot about the present, however. And St. Augustine, while it is a tourist town, also has a lot of great things for locals and people that are looking to not inundate themselves with whatever $5, $10, $20 museums they see. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the beer community. They've had a winery there for as long as I can remember, and distilling is really starting to show up. And hopefully we'll be able to talk to them in a future episode. But one of the organizations that we decided to talk to, who actually reached out to us, was St. Augustine Experiences. And as you can tell, St. Augustine Experiences and its founder, Alex Drywa, focused less on the history, or the tours were built less on the history than it was to enjoy both the history and what's there. And if you go to the St. Augustine Experiences website, they have a number of tours, but one of those is a beer tour. It does a craft beer tour in the middle of St. Augustine. Obviously, that is the one that we took. And what's nice is they actually have a chocolate tour as well. And Alex was gracious enough to kind of marry the two together as we took our tour that day. And I will say my little one made out like a bandit with some of the awesome stops that we went to. So after we went through everything, there were quite a few stops that were made as part of the beer tour and the chocolate tour. We ended up at Rendezvous, which is a restaurant at the tail end of whatever shopping mall is close to the Place de la Constitution, right in the center of town, right at the foot of the Bridge of Lions. And we chatted a little bit, not just about St. Augustine's history and their history with beer and other beverages, but also what St. Augustine is doing now and what St. Augustine Experiences as a company likes to celebrate in the nation's oldest city. We will talk a little bit about the stops that we made once we are finished with the interview, but I do want to get right into it. So Alex Drywa from St. Augustine Experiences, as part of the special St. Augustine Craft Beer Tour. Enjoy. So, to begin, elevator pitch when it comes to St. Augustine and its location in Florida when it comes to, I guess, the creation of Florida. It seems rather uniquely situated to be that hub of what civilization was here about 450 years ago.
Oh, completely. I mean, it's one of those places, unless you kind of grow up in the Northeast Florida, South Georgia area, you really want to hear, even though the Spanish were here for 198 years originally, that saying is true that the history books are always written by the victors, because even growing up, the most we learned about the British was kicking them out. So it's amazing that there's this whole new part of America's history to go down all these rabbit holes. And it's great. I think it's a great place to discover in your adult life too, because I think you appreciate a little bit more how long it's been here and the struggles that people had here for the last 459 years. I mean, I always say this city is a series of fortunate events. So many people could have given up on it a number of times over the last 4.5 centuries. So it's really lucky and special that a place like this is still around in America.
What was the scene, shall we say, like back when I guess the most famous residents would be the Spanish? Was it basically like a miniature Spain, or did they have to take what they had here and kind of create their own amalgam?
Oh yeah, this was not a miniature Spain at all. This was, we were talking about the Wild West in America. This was even wilder than the Wild West. I mean, at least someone had been out there. Lewis and Clark went out there first before settlers went out there. This was, to give it a little backstory too, if you were doing well in Europe, you were not coming over here to the New World. This was either for adrenaline junkies, people working their way up to military, or at the bottom of the barrel. Like, your life was so bad in Europe that you said getting on a boat to this mysterious land 7,000 miles away that few people have seen couldn't be any worse. But in the beginning too, I mean, the original, when the Spanish first got here, it was all about domination. It finally started switching as well to their manifest destiny became Catholicism, which was, let's convert everybody. But it really was about making relationships. I mean, the Spanish didn't know how to make the land arable here. They had to ask the native populations for that. I mean, the only reason they survived was by luckily making friends, a lot of times screwing them over at the same time. But, you said that was the heyday of the Spanish. That was the very beginnings. I always say kind of the heyday, what a lot of people read about is the Gilded Age here, when Flagler really kind of opened up Florida after the Civil War as a tourism destination. People have been coming down here since the early 1800s on what they called health tourism. Like we mentioned before, if you were sick and wealthy enough, they set you down here. They thought the hot, humid air cured almost any ailment, but it was mostly boarding houses, some bed and breakfasts. It wasn't until Flagler built the Ponce de Leon in 1888 that really opened up Florida to the world, though.
And I guess during that heyday of very early 1800s tourism, were they really interested in Florida past the weather? Were they interested in the local culture, in the local agriculture, what they could get out of the land? Or was it just sort of a, I guess, rough and tumble, we have to, and I use air quotes when I say this word, civilize what is an uncivilized, not New York kind of location.
Since the very beginning, people had a big interest in Florida, scientifically, botany, Audubon Society, birds. I mean, this was truly a jungle to most people. I mean, this is a huge piece of land, Florida. People really, it's very, very skinny, as people don't think it's that big. This is a huge, huge piece of land. Even when the United States bought it from Spain in 1821, I mean, they bought it for $5 million. Everyone thought that they were crazy. I mean, there was nothing down here. It was a gigantic swamp. There were so few people living here. What could anybody possibly want to do with this stretch of land? But no, so there have always been people interested since the very beginning in terms of the ecosystem down here, what Florida could produce as well. So yeah, definitely there's always been a sense for exploration down here in Florida, not just the health benefits, but people coming down here to truly explore our coastline, what type of natural resources were down here, what type of animals were down here, what type of plants were down here. So
did the area kind of become an agricultural boom town, or did the economy kind of here sort of rely primarily on tourism to what we see today?
In terms of, as far as I've read too, there's always been some type of farming down here, but it really was that after Civil War explosion in tourism down here. I mean, Flagler was, a lot of things to say about him, good and bad, but he was one of the first kind of farm to table people down here. He started the towns of Hastings, were started as farm towns of his employees just so he could have fresh produce, fresh cows, fresh beef, everything for his hotels right here. So, I mean, again, that's why I love the whole center of the state is still cowboys and cattle as far as the eye could see. Definitely in the last 150 years, not just tourism, but also a breadbasket for a lot of America, especially the Southeast down here.
Awesome. And when it comes to the modern St. Augustine, kind of one of the things that we had spoken about on the tour, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, is how diverse a lot of the offerings are. But when it comes to, I guess, the craft scene, really the two first players that were here were San Sebastian Winery, who is still here, and A1A Ale Works, that had either been created or was purchased by Gordon Biersch a long time ago, and who has since divested themselves of their brewing operations. But that was it for a long time.
Well, even now it's been this whole Renaissance St. Augustine that's had. I mean, I got here for the first time 13 years ago, and the scene was already starting to have its roots there. It was before a lot of the breweries, but you could start seeing the change. But it's crazy to think 13 years ago, Route 1 was still a sleepy stretch out here. Like when you left Jacksonville, you didn't see a lot of cars till maybe you got down to Daytona, get the next airport, or Orlando. And now there's traffic all around St. Johns County. But to give you an idea, I mean, they still used to let private vehicles drive right down the middle of St. George Street up until the late 80s here. Even when they banned vehicles, the trolleys still went up down the St. George Street until the 90s. I mean, that's how quiet it was still just 25, 30 years ago. This whole new renaissance in terms of tourism, events, arts has really been within the last 20, 25 years that Americans have started having a rekindling for America's oldest city. Because again, going back to what we spoke about in the beginning, there is nothing else like this in the country. I mean, this is the only place where you have 5 centuries of architecture within a 6-minute walk, original Spanish streets. I mean, we talked about how these streets were laid out in 1598 and they have not changed since. So again, there is nothing else like this in the country.
And how do you think that a tourism focused economy is able to sustain a wide variety of beverage and food and other options? Because tourism locations, you take a look at Orlando, tends to have the, I guess, unfortunate stigma of being bland and boring and not very interesting, and 12 different iterations of Applebee's.
So the lucky thing, the thing that St. Augustine has going for it is its size. It is compact. A lot of people really don't believe me before they come down here. I tell them from the southernmost place I drink Dog Rose Brewing to the northernmost place I drink Ink and Barley is about an 18-minute walk. It's less than a mile to get from one end of town to the other. So its compactness definitely allows people to explore a wide variety of things without extending themselves too much. But yeah, I tell people, this is the quintessential walking city. Walk up and down the little alleyways, the streets, talk to everybody, eat and drink everything. I mean, there's so many great stories here in St. Augustine. But again, the compactness as well, I think we spoke about this earlier, talking about there's not a lot of room for copycats. So when you see one cool thing open up, you won't see 4 or 5 more. There's not that demand. Every place really needs to have its own unique menu, its own unique beer selection, wine selection, cocktails. And the ceiling's still so high. I mean, as busy as St. Augustine's getting, we hit over 7 million visitors last year. If you go around most of America, I bet if we asked every American where St. Augustine is, I guarantee you 90% still have no idea what you're talking about. No idea. And that's a good thing too, because I mean, obviously we can't, it's already getting to that point where we got to figure out new infrastructure, new parking. So it's good that we're still on a slow growth because the ceiling's still so high and a lot more people are going to come here over the next 1, 5, 10 years to St. Augustine.
And it seems like the craft beer scene, obviously, is rather unique in that it doesn't have a ton of locations, but each location really does seem to have its own separate identity.
Oh,
and I think we've got 5, I guess we would consider, what is it, Jack's Barbecue?
Jack's, Old Coast, Bog, Dog Rose, and Ancient City. 5 completely different breweries, all in different stages of growth as well, too. I mean, Ancient City, they're at Publix now, Buc-ee's, Trader Joe's, and Jacksonville. I mean, how impressive is that? How few products Trader Joe's carries from outside than there is. So yeah, so it's growing. But again, I think it's good for the size we're at now. I mean, most of these buildings are tiny. Most of these plots are tiny. There isn't a lot of commercial space available for somebody to have a production brewery. So that's why I feel lucky that we have these 5 gems that we do already in St. Augustine. Again, St. Augustine is just one piece of this whole Northeast Florida area between St. Johns County, Duval County, Flagler County. We're getting great beer all up and down this Northeast Florida corridor. As you could attest to the St. Augustine Brewers Festival that Dog Roast throws every year, I am super impressed by some of the beer and products that these local breweries are producing year after year after year.
And would you say that St. Augustine has its own scene, or is this merely kind of an extension of the greater Jacksonville, Duval scene, which is of course big and monstrous anyways?
So the city definitely has its own scene now. It's crazy to think that not that long ago, this was the day trip that people were coming to from Orlando, from Jacksonville. Now this is becoming the destination, and people are taking day trips to Jacksonville and Orlando for a day to, visit breweries up there or see Amelia Island or go to an amusement park for a day, but making St. Augustine the destination where they are staying, which I'm so happy about because there is so much to do here. It's so deceiving. People come here for the first time. They go, oh, we could check this off in a quick weekend. You quickly realize you got to come back 7, 8, 9 times to get even close between the breweries, the distilleries, the local winery, the restaurants, the tours, the boat rides, the fishing charters. There is just the museums. I mean, I could keep going on and on. There is so much to do. Growing up in New York City, I always say this little city keeps me and my wife on our toes. It's amazing how much there is to do in St. Augustine.
And I would assume as a tour operator, that's got to be great for you to have different kinds of tours to offer, because you're up to 6 different kinds of tours?
Yes, 8 different types of tours. And a lot of them, I'm a history guy. I love the story of St. Augustine, but I also love introducing people to our favorite culinary scene. I mean, that's why we have so many food and history tours, wine, cocktail, food, beer and history, sweets and history, because not just that I love supporting other local businesses, I like introducing people to the owners that made the city so special. I mean, a lot of my tours only work because there's so much good food and drink around here as well, too. So we do like sharing the story of St. Augustine, plus all the story of the people that make St. Augustine what it is today. Because again, so many changes here, Spanish, British, Spanish, that was the historic one. But then recently, it's such a transient city, too. It's amazing the people that have came here and made this place their home and started the businesses they did here as well, too. So that's my favorite part about St. Augustine is introducing them and what makes this city so great. And
I guess with some of the tours, like the Sweets tour, which we sort of went on, and the food tour that you sort of mentioned, where did you kind of get the impetus to start those? Actually, let's start at the beginning. What was the first tour? I think it was the beer tour that we just finished.
Tour.
And how does a New York City transplant?
Well, when I first got down here 13 years ago, I already had that inkling, that seed in my brain that I would love to do tours here one day. And the history was already here. I just needed to study it. I knew nothing about St. Augustine. As I kept coming down here year after year after year, that is when the culinary scene really started growing with, over the last decade. There's always a lot of classic restaurants here that were fantastic, but over the last decade, 12 years, it has really, it just went from 0 to 60 so quickly. But the beer was what I started noticing first. All these little ones popping up. That's just the kind of scene that I was into in my late 20s and started chatting to a lot of the breweries and just kind of joking around. We should do a beer tour. And when we finally pulled the trigger, I said, that's going to be the first one we do, beer and history. Because this is the only city as well, too, where you can have a direct line of alcohol production from 1565, when Pedro Menendez brought his first brewmaster to drink safely, right up until Doug at Dog Rose, Greg and his team in Ancient City, 4.5 centuries unbroken line of alcohol production here between, colonial Spanish to British, straight up to the 1920s prohibition when alcohol was banned, to our new scene here with the winery, distillery, and breweries. So that was what really made it special, too, is just the history here we have on drinking and alcohol production.
I find it interesting that St. Augustine has such a big beer history. With being Spanish, I would assume that wine would be the drink of the day, and they would be trying to focus on how to make more wines than worrying about
completely
beer.
And the Spanish introduced wines to the whole new world. That's where you get the Mendoza Valley, all the wines of California. Florida, though, is not super great for growing a lot of those grapes. The only grape we have native is the muscadine grape, which grows well here, but it's a much sweeter wine, so you need to develop a palate for that. But that was Pedro Menendez said, why do we keep just bringing a few conquistadors, a few ships? Let's bring everything we need. And a brewmaster was on his ship roster because people realized early, eating, drinking, washing, throwing your garbage in the same water source wasn't making you feel good. But if you brewed that water, if you distilled it, if you turned grapes and wine, that's what made it safe drinking again. So yeah, that was on everyone's roster when they came to the New World, was a brewmaster to make sure they could drink safely.
So coming back to St. Augustine nowadays, even I think was a little surprised on how much choice and how much variety there is, because obviously one of the things that we were able to enjoy was some of the most amazing pierogies that I have had in a very long time. And it just seems to be par for the course, awesome different kinds of cuisine in what I readily dismissed as just being a tourist town.
Totally. I mean, it's so diverse here between Polish, Greek, French, every Latin American country you can think of, Caribbean, fine dining, quick dining. I mean, that is the nice thing. That's the great thing I love about these tours too, is because, as humans, we do get comfortable going to the same places that we know are safe. They always have something we love there. So it's great when I have people on my tours that say they've been coming here for the last 20 years with their kids, and I bring them to 3 or 4 restaurants they have never been to. They go, we've been coming here 20 years, never been to any of these places. And it's not bad. We get comfortable. We know what we like. We know what our kids like and stuff. But that is the one nice thing about tourism. I've worked hospitality my whole life, but tourism is great. I tell everybody, do a walking tour, a food tour, your first day in any new city. It's great to, learn about places, pick your tour guide's brain, figure out what these guys like to go as well. I laugh all the time because I get a lot of people that do the walking tour on their last day. And I go, we're not just going to do history. I'm going to point out every place I love for beers, cocktails, lunches, dinners. By the end, they go, oh man, I can't believe we're leaving tomorrow. I go, oh yeah, always do this on your first day. Then you'll have my card. You'll have a new friend in town. My wife, when I first met my wife, she laughed at how many people I kept in contact with from around the world that I've met on tours over the last 13 years, because that's the special part about it is, I get to research, but the big thing is meet new people from all around the world every single day. And hopefully, give them something special that they wouldn't have done here without me in St. Augustine. So
yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, we're sitting here at the Rendezvous restaurant, which I had always dismissed as just being kind of standard issue pub. I'm taking a look at Heineken and Sam Adams, but we just finished a Westball double, and you've got a La Trappe quad on deck next. I had just dismissed it as being nothing.
It's a little, a lot of people, it's a little deceiving. It's the end of this, shopping arcade down here that you start off on St. George. But these guys are one of the most underrated little great hidden spots here in St. Augustine. And this is, again, I love bringing people here that I know will really appreciate the selection that they have here as well, too. Because it's not a bar for everybody. A lot of people will come here and be like, ooh, I don't know if I would drink any of this. But, if you're trying to push your palate, if you really like worldly beer, global beer, this is the place for you over here. So, and every time you come back, you can try something new.
That's kind of amazing. How difficult is it to have a food tour? Because I feel like, after food at several different stops over 3.5 hours, people aren't going to be able to walk anymore for a walking tour.
We've been doing it for a long time. We try to pace it as well. We try to stuff you while also pacing it at the same time. My biggest thing is I do not want people to have to go to dinner after my tours. And the food tour, we also run it really nicely. Yours is special, and we did this probably one for you guys a little earlier, but most of our alcohol food tours go between 2 and 5:30 after lunch, but before the dinner crowd. So all these restaurants, bars, breweries really appreciate that we're coming in when they're at their quietest. Like I try to have a small footprint too. Like I don't want to tell people I need 8 seats on your 7 p.m. on a Saturday night. No, I mean, I also, I want to support the restaurants. I want to bring people there because, it's just about showing you a preview of what these guys do best, that you want to come back here for dinners and lunches with your family and friends. And it's great. I run into people I had on my tours 2 days ago at all these breweries, restaurants, sweet shops, and that makes me feel really good that people had a great enough time on the tour that they want to come back to all these businesses and try everything else that they offer.
So the best place for people to take a look at each of the tours that you have and to book them, where would they go?
Website, www.staugustineexperiences.com. You can see our Instagram. It's just at St. Augustine Tour Experiences. But yeah, definitely check out our website. Give us an email. Give us a call. We have all of our set tours on there. But as we did today, I love matching up different tours for whether it's families together, bachelorette parties, 50th birthdays. We can work with everybody for anything you want there. That's the great thing about the diversity in the city is we can give you kind of any experience that you're looking for.
And last question for you. I'm pretty sure it's going to be hard to get just one out of you, but what is something that you don't think people really understand is here, but everybody should try when they come to St. Augustine?
Oh, Dave, you ask great questions. What is one thing that everybody should do here in St. Augustine?
But nobody really
I personally
knows about.
think that walk South St. Augustine. When I say South St. Augustine, there's a big plaza, big park right in the middle of this town. The north side is where the St. George Commercial District is, the restaurants are. But me and my wife love the south side of this town. We like picking out all our future homes, but just some of the most gorgeous architecture on the South Historic District here. And again, there's not a bar on every corner, but it's great because you could walk 10, 15 minutes without seeing another human being. And again, don't worry, you're not going to keep walking to Miami. St. Augustine's on a little peninsula, so you just keep hitting water, and it'll force you back up to the center plaza. But definitely, if you're here in town, between all the eating, the drinking, the shopping, take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and walk South St. Augustine and just get transported in time. You'll feel like you went back 100, 150, 200 years, depending on the building you're looking at.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's keep touring.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Thanks so much for bringing the family today, too.
Yeah, no problem. That was the tail end of the tour. We actually did continue on a little bit longer, and you're going to find out who we went to and who we spoke to on our next episode of the podcast. But I do want to mention that we started at Dog Rose Brewing. You've heard them on the podcast many years ago. Went to Ancient City because they have their tap room in the Place de la Constitucion. Actually had some of the most amazing pierogies that we've ever had at a quick stop off at Godfrey's and Goods, which is just on the other side. Hit some amazing art galleries and a Greek Orthodox church that's right in the middle of King George Street, which we didn't even know was there. Obviously had to stop at the Hippo, Whetstone, which is a tradition in St. Augustine, Savannah Suites, just so much to see, and a nice addition to the history that St. Augustine is obviously already celebrating. I do recommend that if you are going to St. Augustine, even if you think you know St. Augustine, definitely connect with them at staugustineexperiences.com. They will not steer you wrong. It is a fantastic tour. Next week, we will still be in St. Augustine. You'll have to find out who that is. And this is an interview that was actually done many, many years ago, and because of my recording equipment failed totally miserably, so we finally got to try it again. But you'll have to find out what that is next week. If you want the update as to when those episodes are getting released, definitely find us on social media. We are at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and even Blue Sky now. We have joined Blue Sky. The only one that's slightly different is Facebook. Facebook is still FL Beer Blog. Not totally sure why. You can also reach out to us at floridabeerblog@gmail.com or follow us on any of the podcasting apps of your choice. We are on YouTube. We are on Apple Podcasts. Google, I know, is getting sunset. We're still on Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere that you can find us. And if you can, like us, and if you can rate us, give us a nice, juicy 5-star review. We definitely encourage you to do so, and that will help us get the word out about awesome Florida craft beer to everybody else on the planet. You can find us at floridabeerblog.com, floridabeerpodcast.com, or even floridapodcastnetwork.com, because we are a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, a collection of amazing podcasts focused right here on the Sunshine State. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Picala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Lagonier. This is David Butler, your host and author. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week. Drink Florida Craft.